Her stain on wood, a weapon below, and one final clue. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Share your city in the comments. It's amazing seeing where you're all from. Your words mean more than you know. Let's begin the tale. When you've worked for Nero Wolfe as long as I have, which is going on 15 years with only a few minor interruptions involving gunfire, kidnapping, or my own temper, you get used to a few things. You get used to being ignored. You get used to being overruled. And you get used to him saying "pfui" as a full sentence, but you never ever get used to someone disrupting the kitchen. It was Tuesday morning, just past 10, and Fritz was in the middle of preparing duck à l'orange, which Wolfe had requested, no, dictated, for dinner. I had just returned from delivering a check to a particularly unpleasant tax attorney on 38th Street when I walked into the front hall and heard voices, two of them, neither belonging to Wolfe or Fritz. One was high and pinched, the other low and clipped. A woman and a man, and from the sound of it they were arguing, quietly but not successfully. I stepped into the dining room and caught the edge of Fritz's white apron vanishing into the kitchen. Wolfe wasn't in his office. The voices were coming from the kitchen. Now, I don't make it a habit to interfere with Fritz's domain. He guards that space like a monk guards a wine cellar. But this wasn't the usual rattle of pots or murmured talk about time versus tarragon. This was unfamiliar. And Wolfe, the man who refused to eat food made in a restaurant kitchen, would not appreciate strangers near his cooktop. I stepped in. The kitchen was bright, warm, and smelled like orange. Zest and rendered duck fat. Fritz stood stiffly at the prep table, hands damp with citrus. Across from him, a young woman in a plum wool coat clutched a folded piece of paper and looked like she'd just survived a subway brawl. Beside her was a tall man with sandy hair, and a scar that cut diagonally across his chin, like someone had taken a swipe with a broken beer bottle and missed the important parts. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice casual but loaded, "but unless one of you is a Michelin inspector or has been personally invited by Nero Wolfe, I suggest you take whatever domestic mystery you're cooking up and get the hell out of our kitchen." The woman turned to me with wide eyes. Hazel, intelligent and twitchy. I'm sorry," she said, stepping back. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was told this was the only way to speak to Mr. Wolfe without being turned away." She glanced at the man, who didn't look at her but kept his eyes on the countertop, specifically a butcher block cutting board near the edge, which Fritz had nudged halfway aside as if he'd been interrupted mid-chop. "He doesn't take uninvited visitors," I said, "especially not through the kitchen. That's like entering a church through the confessional." "I left a note," she insisted, "last week with your secretary, Miss Kent. Lily Kent, our temp from the agency, while Lon Cohen's niece was off having an appendix removed. She was efficient and bright, but new. I made a note to give her a refresher on who gets buzzed in and who doesn't." "Mr. Wolfe hasn't responded," the woman continued, "but I need his help. I think someone's been in this house before. That got my attention." "In this house?" She nodded and unfolded the paper. No, not paper. A recipe card, stained at the edges, a faint fingerprint smudged across the bottom. It was Fritz's handwriting. I recognized the looping F, but the recipe was unfamiliar. It read, "Duck à l'orange," with Cointreau reduction. Note, "Do not store with the original blade." "Secure beneath the board, what the hell's?" I murmured, taking the card. Fritz looked stricken. He took it from my hand like it was a stolen Rembrandt. "I did not write this," he said stiffly. "It looks like mine, but it is not mine." The fee woman looked between us nervously. "It was left in my coat pocket 2 days ago at my apartment. I haven't been in this house since I was 10. That was enough mystery before noon." I ushered them both out of the kitchen and into the front room. Then I buzzed Wolfe. One buzz, urgent, not dangerous. He wouldn't appreciate it, But I didn't care. Something about that recipe card and the way the guy with the scar hadn't spoken was needling my neck hairs. Wolfe's voice crackled over the intercom. Archie. Explain. I gave him the essentials. A woman named Cora Lang, former resident of this very house when it was a boarding house in the 90s. A fake recipe card left in her coat. A man named Dax Fuller, who says he's her friend, though the look he gave, her said he preferred a leash, and a single unsettling sentence about the knife under the cutting board. There was a long pause. I waited. Fritz stood like a stone. Then Wolfe said, without inflection, "Bring them up." And just like that, Nero Wolfe took a case without a fee, a contract, or a proper breakfast, which meant two things. One, he already knew more than I did. And two, somebody, maybe in this house, had poked the wrong bear with the wrong blade. If you've never watched Nero Wolfe react to strangers invading his personal space, you've missed one of life's more refined performances in controlled fury. Cora Lang and her shadow, Dax Fuller, followed me up the stairs to Wolfe's office, Fritz hovering behind them with the suspicious air of a man who's just caught someone polishing silver with oven grease. Cora moved like someone trained to be inconspicuous, but too nervous to pull it off. Dax Fuller didn't bother. His eyes scanned everything, door frame, ceiling corners, the Persian rug underfoot. I could already tell he didn't like the place. Wolfe sat behind his desk, a mountain in canary yellow pajamas and a brown dressing gown that looked like it had cost more than my car. His eyes didn't move from the open dictionary in front of him. He turned one page slowly with a single pink finger, then finally looked up. "You have intruded," he said. Cora opened her mouth, but he raised a hand, not fast, just enough to seize command of the room. "You trespassed upon my kitchen." "You disrupted, Mr. Goodwin," interrupted Fritz Brenner in the midst of culinary preparations, "and introduced a document of unknown origin into my home." "Why?" I'm sorry," Cora said. "I know I shouldn't have, but I didn't know what else to do. I've tried other detectives, police, nobody takes me seriously." "That may be because you are being unclear," Wolfe said precisely. "So you have one opportunity. Begin at the beginning. Mr. Goodwin, take a chair. Fritz, bring coffee." I sat. Fritz vanished. Cora stood in front of Wolfe's desk like a student caught cheating on a vocabulary test. "I grew up in this house," she said. "A long time ago, when it was still a boarding house." "Your age?" Wolfe asked. 31. He nodded. "Continue." "My mother, Ellen Lang, rented a room here from 1994 to 1996. She was a secretary, single mother. I was 10. We stayed about 18 months. You recall this place? Barely, only fragments, the stairs, the smell of furniture polish, a big man yelling about orchids. I never came back." Wolfe allowed himself a small grunt. "And now? Last week I got a phone call, no name, just a voice saying, 'You lived at 9018 West 35th Street. Something was left there. You're not safe.'" Wolfe folded his hands. "And you believed this?" "Not at first, but then I found the card. In my coat pocket. A recipe I'd never seen before. In handwriting that looked familiar." I looked. "Up the address. Found out it was still owned privately. Found you. I thought—" She hesitated. "I thought maybe someone who used to live here hid something." "Something," Wolfe echoed, arching a brow. "I don't know, that's the problem. I don't know if it's a warning, a clue, or just someone playing games with my memory, but I didn't imagine the card." "You certainly didn't," I said. "I've seen Fritz's handwriting often enough to testify in court. It wasn't his, but it was close enough to be creepy." Wolfe turned to the man still standing silently in the corner. "And you, sir?" "Dax Fuller," he said, voice flat. "Private security. Retained by Miss Lang." "No, I'm her cousin." "Interesting." Wolfe tapped his fingers. "And what is your opinion of this alleged threat?" I've worked long enough in asset recovery to know a misdirection when I see one, Fuller said. Somebody wants her to come back here. Whoever it is, they know where she lived, what she wore, and what pocket she'd reach into when she got home. Wolfe made a low sound in his throat. Fritz returned with coffee. He placed the tray down and, without looking at Cora or Fuller, retreated as if the conversation might curdle the cream. Wolfe leaned back. Mr. Goodwin. Sir. You will locate the other former boarders who resided here from 1994 to 1996. Cross-reference names with our deed and tax records. Then, if you must, consult Saul. Understood. To Miss Lang. Have you told anyone else about this? No. I don't even talk to most of my family. Wolfe nodded, eyes closed. Very well, leave the card with Mr. Goodwin. You may go. Cora blinked. Wait, that's it? You believe me? Wolfe's eyes opened slowly. I do not accept cases. I accept challenges. You have presented one. You may return tomorrow at 4. She started to speak again, but I was already on my feet. This way, Miss Lang. Mr. Fuller. They followed me out. I closed the door behind them and gave Wolfe a look. You believe her? No, he said, but I believe something happened. And the card? I would very much like to know what was once stored under my cutting board, and why someone wants her to remember it. I walked them out, got Cora's number, and watched Fuller glare at the street like he expected it to pull a gun. As they left, something flickered behind Cora's cool exterior. She looked at the brownstone, not the way people usually do, not with curiosity or awe, but with recognition, the kind that tastes of blood and old wallpaper. Back inside, Fritz was waiting. Search the kitchen, he said tersely. Nothing under the board, nothing missing. Not even a knife. Nothing. But the drawer was not as I left it this morning. You sure? He stiffened. Yes, that was all I needed. Back upstairs I found Wolfe feeding his orchids. He didn't look up as I came in. What do you think? I asked. She was truthful in parts, lying in others. About what? About the card's origin. She did not find it in her coat. She's lying about how it came to her, and possibly when. You think she planted it? Not necessarily. But she knows more than she's said. Mr. Fuller is not her cousin. He said he lied. His diction is military. He is not related by blood. That was not familial protection. It was contractual. That stopped me. So I considered Fuller's face, the practiced blankness of it. And the thing under the board? I have no idea, Wolfe admitted, which is precisely why I intend to find out. Finding people who used to live in a house that hasn't had a tenant since Clinton was in office is not what you'd call a one-phone-call job. But this wasn't my first round of ghost chasing, and I had some names, some luck, and a reliable guy named Saul Panzer to make the impossible seem like Tuesday brunch. After a little digging and a very persuasive call to the Department of Housing, records which may have involved a fake mustache and a story about asbestos, I had a short list of boarders from the mid-90s, when Wolfe's brownstone briefly wore the mask of a shared residence. The situation, as Wolfe had once described with acid in his tone, had been an aberration of necessity, following a legal spat with the city over property taxes. The boarding arrangement lasted less than 2 years before Wolfe paid off the debt and banished all tenants, never to allow another soul to sleep under his roof who didn't cook, clean, or conduct investigations at his direction. By 3 o'clock, I had names and notes: Leora Mims, then a live-in nurse, single, no kids. Now retired, lives in Queens, Gilbert Gilly Marks. Then a failed playwright with 2 arrests for disorderly conduct. Now reportedly teaching drama to high schoolers in Yonkers, Wallace Reeve. Then unemployed, freelance antique. Broker. Now disappeared off public record after 2007. Ellen Lang, Cora's mother, died in 2012. Cause stroke. No criminal or civil record. Ava and Richard Vale. Married couple, tech workers, divorced in 1999. Richard deceased. Ava, now in DC, works in policy lobbying. It wasn't a bad start, considering the building was effectively scrubbed from tenant memory, like a well-handled cover-up. I gave the list to Wolfe, who had returned to his desk and resumed sulking over his violated cutting board, like a man whose cellar had been defiled. He glanced at the list, grunted, and tapped 2 names with 1 finger. Miss Mims and Mr. Marks. Speak to them. Not Reeve? His absence is more valuable than his presence for now. So that's how I found myself driving to Queens in a borrowed car that smelled faintly of mint gum and tragedy, knocking on the door of a garden apartment that hadn't seen a new paint job since dial-up. Leora Mims opened the door with an expression that hovered between suspicion and amusement. 72 alert eyes, hair dyed a shade of auburn that belonged to a younger decade, and a cardigan that had seen at least 3 presidents. Yes? Miss Mims, my name is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. That was usually enough to get me inside, or at least onto a porch. This time it worked better than expected. "Oh my God, that man's still alive," she asked, stepping back. "Come in, sit. You want a scone? I made a whole tray." I declined the scone but accepted the chair. The apartment smelled like vanilla and old dust. "You lived at 918 West 35th from 1994 to 1996, I said. "What do you remember?" "Everything," she said crisply. "I only left because I got a better offer in the Hamptons, and Wolfe made it clear he didn't like tenants. Not that he ever spoke to us. He just glared from a distance like a very disappointed librarian. Do you remember a little girl, Cora Lang?" She blinked, nodded. "Yes, sweet kid, kept to herself. Mother was a piece of work, though." "What do you mean?" "Secretive. She'd vanish for nights at a time. Cora would be with a sitter, or sometimes she'd knock on my door crying. I didn't pry, but Ellen was, let's say, not entirely legal in her employment. Drugs? I don't know. She never brought anything obvious into the house, but there were men, loud arguments on the stairs. Once I found a rolled wad of cash under the mailbox with someone else's name on it. Did you keep it?" "I'm a nurse," she said with a frown. "No, I put it back. It was gone by morning." I logged that away. "Do you recall anything unusual ever being stored in the kitchen, under the counter, hidden?" She hesitated. "There was an incident," she said. "I don't know if this is what you're looking for. One night I couldn't sleep. I went down to make tea. Fritz was already in the kitchen, looked furious. He was kneeling by the spice drawer." "Spice drawer?" "Yes. Said someone had moved his things. He was talking to himself, angry. I heard him say, 'If it happens again, I'll leave.' You're sure?" "Positive. I never saw him that upset again." I thanked her, took the address of her cat's veterinarian for no particular reason, and headed out to Yonkers, where Gilly Marks taught improv to children whose parents had clearly given up on college ambitions. Marks answered the door in a faded Yale hoodie and cargo shorts, mid-50s, tired eyes, breath like reheated gin. He wasn't surprised to see me. He was delighted. "Nero Wolfe's still alive?" he croaked. "I thought that old buzzard would have died mid-repast." "He's in excellent health, thank you. Well, come in. Tell him I still owe him for keeping the rats out of the cellar." "Did he ever install that dumbwaiter?" "No." He offered me a beer, which I declined. The apartment looked like a set from Waiting for Godot, if the props were all Craigslist rejects. "You remember Ellen Lang?" "Oh, yeah. Real fox. Smoked. Too much, never talked to anyone. Her kid was always with her, quiet little thing. What happened to her? She's the reason I'm here." I gave him the story. The card, the house, the odd intrusion. He laughed. "Sounds like someone's trying to dig up the past. That's the working theory. You recall anything going missing in the kitchen?" He leaned back. "Kitchen was off limits. Fritz ran it like a Swiss prison. Once I tried to microwave something in the middle of the night. Fritz heard it from his bedroom and banned me from the fridge for a week. But did anything ever happen? Someone tampering?" His mood changed subtly. A pause. A finger tapped. On the side of his beer can, once in, he said. Someone broke in. Wolfe said it was a burglar, but nothing was stolen, nothing except... Except? A carving knife. One of Fritz's best just disappeared. Reported. Hell no, Wolfe doesn't report anything to the cops, said it was handled internally. I let that sink in. Mark squinted at me. What's really going on? We're not sure yet, I said. But someone wants Cora Lang to come back, and they want her to remember something hidden in that house. His face went pale. You think this has to do with Ellen? We're trying to find out. Back at the brownstone, I laid it out for Wolfe. Mims's story about Fritz's near mutiny, Marx's tale of the missing knife, the alleged break-in, the strangely protective silence around Ellen Lang. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Someone wanted something removed from this house, he said. And it was done quietly. No police, no reports, only memory remains. And now that memory is being deliberately reawakened. I nodded. And Cora Lang is the key. He tapped a finger once on the desk. Then we must find out what she was made to forget. By now we had two confirmed weird memories. One missing knife, and a very large man in a very expensive chair who had begun making faint humming noises while rereading 18-year-old case files as though they might contain prophecy. Wolfe hadn't declared the case substantial yet, which is usually his equivalent of a standing ovation, but he had asked Fritz for cold roast beef instead of warm trout at lunch, and that for him was a sign of focused discomfort. My job was clear: dig deeper, and if possible get someone to say the wrong thing at the right time. First on my list was Ava Vale, the former co-tenant turned DC policy lobbyist. Getting her on the phone had taken 3 calls, 2 names dropped, and a mention of a matter connected to your former husband. That cracked the ice. I haven't thought about that house in over 20 years, she said, her voice like polished silver. It was a strange place, quiet, unnaturally quiet. What do you remember about Ellen Lang? A pause. Reserved. She had secrets, I think. I once heard her arguing with someone in the hallway, very late at night. A man. I asked Richard about it afterward, and he said she was trouble waiting to ignite. He had a talent for drama. Did you agree? No. I thought she was fragile, like something that had been shattered and put back together but not quite right. What about Cora? A ghost of a girl. She looked like she knew too much and was never allowed to say any of it. I was getting a consistent picture. I let her talk more, asked about her former husband's death. She said it had been an accident, carbon monoxide leak in a rental cabin upstate. Tragic, isolated. I made a note. Then I asked about the kitchen. You mean the sanctum? She laughed. No one went in there except Fritz. You'd have an easier time sneaking into Fort Knox with a crowbar than past that man with a soup spoon. Still, I pressed, you ever hear of anything going missing? Knife, note, something stashed and then removed? She went silent. Then, one night, this would have been winter, maybe 95, someone knocked on our door. It was Wolfe, in person. He asked Richard to come downstairs, wouldn't say why. Did he go? Yes. Came back 20 minutes later, white as chalk. Never said a word about it. The next morning, he told me we'd be moving out by spring. I whistled. Any idea what it was about? None, but Wolfe was furious. The kind of fury that doesn't shout. It chills. Another piece on the board. If Wolfe had intervened personally, something had gotten under his skin. And that didn't happen unless his house, his routine, or his sense of order had been offended in biblical fashion. After I hung up with Ava, I made a decision. There was one person I needed to confront directly, Cora Lang. She'd given me a temporary address, an Airbnb near Madison, supposedly for the duration of this consultation, as she put it in her carefully rehearsed tone. I didn't believe for a second it was a casual setup. I found her in a studio apartment above a used bookstore, still in the plum coat, sitting at a tiny round table, drinking chamomile tea like she was in the waiting room of a therapist she couldn't afford. "You came fast," she said. "I run errands for a genius. Speed is part of the service." She gave a twitch of a smile, but it didn't land. Too much tension in her hands coiled around the mug. "I talked to some of the former tenants," I said. "They all seem to remember you, and your mother." She looked down. "I didn't think they would. They also remember things missing. Knives, notes, secret arguments, and they remember your mother as someone who carried danger in her purse. Still nothing." "Cora," I said quietly, "we need to stop playing memory games. That card didn't just appear in your coat. Someone's trying to stir something, and you're cooperating." "Why?" She didn't look up. "Because I don't know what I'm trying to remember. Only that something happened in that kitchen, something I saw or heard, and it's been coming back in pieces. Try me." "I remember standing in the doorway," she said slowly. "The light was on. Fritz wasn't there. There was a man. Tall, thin, angry. He was holding a knife, not waving it, just holding it. When was this? I don't know, but I remember the tile floor and my mother's voice, whispering like she didn't want me to hear but knew I would." What was she saying? She said, "Don't do it here, it's too close." I sat back. "You didn't tell Wolfe this?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't want to know what they were talking about. If I say it out loud, it becomes real." That was the closest to a confession I was going to get. I thanked her and left. As I hit the street, a shape moved 2 buildings down, a man leaning against a mailbox, pretending to look at his phone. Dax Fuller. I strolled over. "Fancy running into you." He didn't even blink. "You following me now?" I could ask the same. "I don't answer to you, Mr. Goodwin." "No, but if you're going to lurk like a B-movie assassin, maybe take off the Bluetooth earpiece. You're not fooling anyone." He turned and walked away. I didn't follow. He wasn't the threat, at least not the first one in line. Back at the brownstone, I laid it out. Wolfe listened, steepled, hummed once. "She lied again," he said after a moment. "But this time less." "What part?" "The man with the knife. She remembers more than she claims. She has not yet revealed the object in question." "You think it's still in the house?" "No," Wolfe said. "I think it left with Ellen Lang. But I think the knowledge of it, the idea, remains, and someone wants it buried permanently." I nodded slowly. "Then what's the next move?" He closed his eyes. "We must uncover who knew what then and who fears it now." Then he opened his eyes. "Tomorrow, we speak with Saul. You don't have to believe in ghosts to know when something's wrong in the brownstone. It doesn't rattle chains or whisper from the air vents. What it does is move the salt. Fritz is as close to compulsive as a man can be without needing clinical evaluation. Every drawer, every spice jar, every carving fork is placed with the spatial precision of a diamond cutter. So when I found the bay leaves nudged 2 inches left and the sea salt jar with its lid askew, I didn't need to sniff for sulfur or call the Vatican. Something had been tampered with. I'd come down just past 10, hoping to snag a cup of coffee while Wolfe was deep in orchid meditation. The kitchen was empty but warm, and everything looked right until it didn't. I checked the drawer where Fritz kept his smaller blades, the paring knives, a delicate boning knife with a custom wood handle Wolfe had imported from France. The drawer itself was unlocked as usual, but the felt liner was slightly bunched, like someone had reached in without smoothing it after. I didn't touch anything, just backed out slowly, grabbed a pad from the pantry shelf, and scribbled 2 words. "Knife drawer." Then I marched it upstairs like a kid handing in his overdue homework. Wolfe took one look, didn't speak, and pressed the intercom. "Fritz." A moment later, our chef appeared in the doorway, like a man expecting sentence. "Check your tools," Wolfe said. "Everything." Fritz disappeared. Wolfe looked at me. "Well?" "It wasn't like yesterday," I said. Whoever was in the kitchen last night or early this morning wasn't rummaging. They were checking, deliberate, gentle, looking for something. Wolfe closed his eyes. Or checking to see if it's still here. My brain pinged. The item. The one Cora's memories dancing around. He opened his eyes. Yes. Which strongly suggests someone believes it was hidden here, and may yet remain. You think it was a knife? I think, Wolfe said slowly, that a knife was the tool, not the treasure. Fritz returned, face pale. Nothing missing, but the cleaver is scratched. A surface scratch near the base. It was not like that yesterday. Wolfe nodded once. Archie summoned Mr. Panzer. Saul Panzer is not flashy. He doesn't carry brass knuckles or use a magnifying glass. He looks like a man who'd sell you insurance badly. But if you wanted to know what someone ate for breakfast last Thursday, or whether the man claiming to be your cousin is ex-KGB, Saul could find out in a day and leave you an invoice written on the back of your dry cleaning receipt. He showed up at 2 that afternoon, nodded once at Fritz, once at me, and once at Wolfe in that order. Wolfe wasted no time. Mr. Panzer, we have a situation involving an intrusion. Twice now, someone has entered our kitchen, subtly disturbed specific objects, and left no trace of forced entry. We believe the motive relates to an item allegedly hidden here some 29 years ago. Saul nodded again, unsurprised. Wolfe handed him the file I'd compiled on the former tenants. Observe the movements of Miss Cora Lang and Mr. Dax. Fuller, independently. Confirm their association and look for links to any of the others on this list, especially Wallace Reeve. He has not surfaced, and that is suspicious. Got it. Report directly to Mr. Goodwin. Saul rose. Give me 36 hours. He left without another word. I turned to Wolfe. You're worried it's Cora. I'm concerned she's being used, Wolfe said, or perhaps is complicit. She remembers too much and reveals too little. And Fuller is lying. He was not merely watching her yesterday. He was watching you. That little revelation hit with the grace of a brick through glass. So I'm a target? You're bait, Wolfe said. They want to know how much we know and whether the house still holds anything of value. I mulled that over. Should I wear a bell? Only if it helps you think. That night, I stayed up. Not in the front room where Wolfe could hear. Me pacing, but downstairs in the kitchen, seated in the dark with a thermos and a 32 under the counter. Fritz was not pleased when I told him, but after some whispered persuasion and a promise not to touch a single copper pot, he let me plant myself like a detective with insomnia. The house was still. Even the radiator had the decency to hold its breath. Just after 3 a.m., a soft creak, not from the kitchen door. This came from the service stairs behind the pantry, which hadn't been used since Fritz installed an herb shelf where the entrance used to be. I stood silently. The noise came again, not footsteps, a subtle shifting, like someone lifting a panel, then silence. I moved slowly, no flashlight, no bravado. Around the counter, toward the pantry. The air had changed, just slightly, the kind of stillness that follows heat. There on the far side of the spice rack, a small piece of paper, folded, tucked under the jar of marjoram. I took it, unfolded it. Inside, written in careful block print, "Don't dig, not yours." No name, no date, no smudges. Just a message. I went back upstairs and slept with the note in my sock. Wolfe read it the next morning with no visible reaction. Fritz made eggs Florentine and said nothing. At 10:15 the phone rang. I picked it up. Goodwin. Saul. Got something. I motioned to Wolfe and put it on speaker. Fuller's not her cousin, Saul said. He's former private military. Left a corporate security firm in Chicago last month under a sealed arbitration agreement. Guess why? Something with surveillance. I asked. Close, he was caught falsifying entries on an internal log, trying to cover the movement of restricted items out of a secure site. Lovely, I said. And what about Cora? She's clean. Mostly. But she has a sealed juvenile record from 1997. Something happened when she was 12, expunged, and this is where it gets interesting. Her mother was questioned that same year in connection to a missing persons case. I froze. Who? Wallace Reeve. The name hung there. Wolfe's voice, soft and sure. Find the file. We must know what became of Mr. Reeve. I'll call in a favor. Give me time. Click, I looked at Wolfe. You think Reeve's the reason for the note? I think Reeve is the object. I stared. You think he was, what, killed, hidden in the house? No. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. But someone feared he might be, and someone else fears the truth will prove it. If you're waiting for a mystery to break wide open like an overripe peach, you've never worked for Nero Wolfe. Mysteries, according to him, don't break. They are peeled, layer by exasperating layer. And this one? This one had skin, like an armored cantaloupe. The next morning I was halfway through a report on Cora's sealed juvenile record, mostly just notes and angry question marks, when Saul Panzer walked in unannounced. He nodded at me, nodded at Wolfe, and placed a manila folder on the desk, like it contained a smoking gun. Wolfe motioned. I opened it. Courtesy of a judge in Syracuse who owed me a favor, Saul said. That sealed file, I read it. The short version. In November 1997, Ellen Lang reported her daughter missing for a 6-hour window. Cora was found hiding under a neighbor's porch. She said she was scared, I murmured, scanning. Said she'd seen a man with blood on his shirt. In the kitchen. Wolfe's eyes didn't blink. Saul continued. The man was never identified. Ellen claimed it was a nightmare, and the girl recanted the next day. No charges filed. But 2 months later, Wallace Reeve disappeared. Same. Year, I said. Same week, Saul corrected. That hit the air like a dropped wrench. Wolfe closed his eyes, a sure sign his mind was moving faster than the rest of us could keep up. There's more, Saul said. Reeve's last known job was as a broker for off-the-record estate items. He ran appraisals on unclaimed valuables, usually posthumous cases with poor documentation. But in '96 he started working under the table for a collector named Grant Vellum. Vellum's hobby? Acquiring historically significant blades. Wolfe opened his eyes. Blades? So knives, sabers, bayonets, anything with provenance and a death toll. He was obsessed. Once paid 6 figures for a knife that allegedly belonged to Jesse James. You're suggesting, I said, Reeve smuggled something into the brownstone. More likely through it, Saul said. If he was storing or transporting high-value weapons, he needed inconspicuous drop sites. He had a key to the brownstone, briefly. Wolfe's lease agreement included a clause about temporary absence. Reeve used that window to access the kitchen. Once, maybe twice when Fritz was on vacation. Wolfe let out a low grunt. Not quite a fooey, but close. He housed something here, Wolfe said. Not permanently, temporarily. And he told Ellen Lang. I finished Saul's thought, and Ellen told Cora not to remember, which made the card a breadcrumb, a psychological match flare designed to reignite a memory buried under decades of avoidance. Wolfe turned to Saul. Where is Mr. Vellum? Dead. 2006. Heart attack. But his estate was picked over, and a few items were unaccounted for, rumored to include a 19th-century surgical blade used in a Civil War field hospital. One of a kind. Vanished. Too valuable to discard, Wolfe murmured. Too dangerous to sell without cover. A blade that vanished. A tenant who vanished. A girl with a fragmented memory. The threads were knotting. I spent the rest of the day tracking down one last name. Detective Rourke. the original investigator from the 1997 Missing Persons Report, on Wallace Reeve. He was retired now, living somewhere near Albany. After 2 voicemails and a call to his niece, he agreed to talk, on one condition. No recorders, he said, and no names in the papers. "You have my word," I said. "Notebook ready." We met at a diner near Poughkeepsie, where the coffee was bad and the bacon was worse. Rourke looked like a man who had been born suspicious and only got more so. "I remember the girl," he said. "Cora, skittish, smart, saw something she wasn't supposed to." "You think she was telling the truth?" "She was terrified. Not confused, not inventing. Her mother shut it down hard. Told me if I didn't back off, she'd take legal action." "And Reeve?" Rourke leaned in. Nobody wanted to touch it. Reeve was small-time, sure, but he had clients. Clients with deep pockets and long shadows. NYPD didn't want to poke that nest. No body, no blood trail, no crime. "But you think he was killed?" "I know he was. I just couldn't prove it." "And Wolfe?" He chuckled. "He stonewalled. Me. Said there'd been a tenant by that name, but no contact since early '96. Said the man left no belongings and owed no rent." "Do you believe him?" Rourke stirred his coffee, shrugged. "I believe Wolfe doesn't let anything happen in his house without knowing it. If something went down, he either didn't know or he chose not to." I got back to the brownstone. 8:30. The lights were dimmed, the kitchen empty. Wolfe was waiting in his chair, a small yellow notebook open on his lap. I gave him the Rourke report. He read silently for 5 minutes, then closed the notebook. "We are nearly there," he said. "Where exactly?" "To the motive, which is—" "Not murder," Wolfe said. "Erasure." I blinked. "Someone wants Cora's memory deleted," Wolfe explained. "They want the house free of any remaining connection to Reeve's disappearance. The card was bait, but not for her. For me. You think they wanted you involved?" "Of course. If I declare there was nothing of note hidden here, no blade, no evidence, the matter dies." "That's a hell of a gamble," Wolfe nodded. "One someone has been planning for years." He turned his head toward the hallway. "Tomorrow invite. All of them, Cora, Fuller, Miss Mims, Mr. Marks, Ava Vale if she will travel. We will have our confrontation. And someone," he said, eyes narrowing, "will tell me why I was used." Nero Wolfe never enters a confrontation. He arranges one. By noon the next day, the brownstone was an occupied territory. We had 5 guests. 3 trays of canapes Fritz prepared under silent protest, and one increasingly agitated security consultant, leaning against the radiator like it owed him money. Cora Lang arrived first, jittery, overdressed, polite to Fritz in the kitchen, and visibly flinching when he didn't reply. Next came Jilly Marks, who greeted me with a theatrical wink and a muttered "déjà vu." Then Miss Mims, arriving, with the stride of someone showing up to a funeral just to be seen. Ava Vale came straight from the airport, wheeled luggage in tow, and an air of caffeinated irritation. Dax Fuller brought up the rear, punctual and silent, pretending not to scan the exits. The office was ready, chairs arranged in a loose horseshoe facing Wolfe's desk like nervous worshippers at a silent mass. Wolfe hadn't moved since breakfast. When I ushered in the last of them, he looked up. "Good afternoon. You are all here because of a lie. Some of you told it. One of you orchestrated it. I didn't say a word. Neither did anyone else." Wolfe allowed the silence to steep like overbrewed tea. "The lie concerns a man named Wallace Reeve," he continued, "a blade of historic value, and a memory deliberately buried in a child's mind. That child is now a woman, Miss Lang, and she has been manipulated into revisiting this house under the pretense of seeking protection. She was in fact bait. The trap, however, is mine." Marks snorted. "So this is theater. I came for answers." Wolfe stared him down. "You came to ensure none of us remember what you did 28 years ago. Shall I continue?" Marks shifted. Cora looked at him in shock. Wolfe gestured slightly, and I handed him the note. Don't dig, not yours. This was left in my kitchen 3 nights ago. A warning. Or a plea. The author meant to remind us that what's buried should stay buried, but the truth has a persistent stench. Ava Vale crossed her legs. Mr. Wolfe, I've been cooperative, but I'd like to know what exactly I'm being accused of. You. Nothing. Yet, Wolfe said. But your ex-husband was visited by me in 1996, when he attempted to sell an item left in my kitchen, a knife of considerable value. He claimed it was a family heirloom. I knew he was lying. I demanded its removal. He complied. Shortly thereafter, he and you moved out. Her lips tightened, but she said nothing. Wolfe turned to Miss Mims. You witnessed an argument in the kitchen. Fritz disturbed. Something moved. You did not report it. I didn't think it was criminal, she said quietly, because it wasn't. Yet, he looked at Cora. You saw the knife. You heard your mother. You remember more than you admit. Cora looked pale. I was a kid. Children remember vividly, Wolfe said. You said, she whispered. Don't do it here. It's too close. That was not fear of you being hurt. That was fear of you witnessing something damning. Wolfe tapped the desk once. Wallace Reeve disappeared in 1997, no remains, no charges. But 2 months earlier, your mother was seen arguing with him in this house. Reeve had been smuggling weapons, historic, valuable, using the brownstone as a temporary drop. One of them went missing. I believe your mother kept it. Cora gasped. No. She feared him, Wolfe said, and she knew what that blade was worth, to collectors and to men like Reeve. I believe she struck him or aided someone who did. Either way, he vanished, and she silenced you. Cora was trembling now. Fuller stood, but Wolfe barked, Sit. Fuller did, jaw tight. Wolfe turned to him. You're not her cousin. Your private security hired to retrieve the blade, or at least confirm it was never recovered. Your employer is one of Reeve's former clients. Silence. Fuller didn't speak, but he didn't deny it. Wolfe pressed. You knew she'd seek me out. You encouraged it. You hoped I would declare nothing. Remained here that her memory was flawed, but you weren't sure. So you searched quietly twice. Fuller's face was stone. And when I didn't react immediately, Wolfe said, you escalated, you planted the card, you waited. I watched Cora look at Fuller now, as if she'd never seen him. You lied to me, she said. She had to know, Fuller said evenly. You had to remember, Cora, someone had to. If the knife was still here, if she hid it in the house, someone was bound to find it eventually. Better it come back clean. That's what this is about? Cora stood now, hands clenched. My mother may have killed someone, and you're worried about who owns a knife. No, Wolfe said. He's worried someone will prove he already recovered it and sold it. That landed like a shot. Fuller flinched. That's absurd. Is it? Wolfe said mildly. Because Reeve's collector died in 2006, his estate inventory noted several missing items. But one surfaced 5 years ago in Berlin, a Civil War surgical blade, anonymous seller, sold through a private auction firm in Prague. Wolfe reached to his side drawer, pulled a single envelope and placed it on the desk. I had Salt trace it. The transaction came through a shell company with a Delaware address. Your last employer used the same legal firm to set up their shell accounts. We have enough to start an inquiry. Fuller stood. You can't prove— No, Wolfe agreed, but you can't disprove it. And Miss Lang can press charges for fraud, coercion, and harassment, and I can make the noise loud enough to wake the dead. The room went still. Then Fuller said very quietly, What do you want? Wolfe looked at Cora. I want Miss Lang. To know the truth, that her memory was accurate, that her silence was coerced, that her past, however painful, does not belong to scavengers. He turned back to Fuller. You will sign a confession, not criminal, but civil, admitting to misleading, mislang and planting the recipe card. You will forfeit any future claim to the Reeve blade, should it be found, and you will leave this city. Fuller stared, his face blank. Then he nodded. Cora sank into her chair. Marks cleared his throat. So, we're done? Wolfe said nothing. Just turned his head to me. I opened the door. They left one by one. No one spoke. There's a moment that always comes after a Wolfe room clearing, the kind of silence that feels not relieved but rearranged, like the furniture of someone's life has been quietly moved while they were out getting groceries. After. Fuller signed the statement Wolfe dictated, neat block print initialed on every corner like it might try to sneak out. He left the brownstone without a word. No fight, no second glance at Cora, just gone. That kind of exit isn't surrender, it's strategy. The man would resurface somewhere under a different name in a different city, hunting a different artifact. But not here. Wolfe had sealed that door tight. Cora didn't leave right away. She stayed seated while Wolfe returned to his orchids, her hands folded like someone trying to hold on to warmth after a long illness. I waited in the office doorway, watching her eyes sweep the room like they were memorizing something. I don't know if I wanted to remember, she said quietly, but I needed to know I wasn't crazy. Wolfe didn't turn around. Sanity is overrated, truth is the only tonic. Cora stood. She left her number on Wolfe's desk, a small square scrap torn from her notebook, and asked if she might call again someday. If it's not about murder or mushrooms, I said, he'll consider it. She smiled. Brief, real, then walked out. That should have been the end of it. But Wolfe wasn't satisfied. He called me back into the office half an hour later and told me to call the rest of them, Mims, Marks, and Ava Vale. Tell them we were finishing the case. He wanted them in the office again tonight. One final gathering. You already confronted them, I said. What else is left? I ask questions, Wolfe said. Now I will answer one. That was Wolfe at his most. Ominous they arrived grudgingly. Mims wore the same purple scarf she had at the first meeting, which I took as a sign of superstition. Gilly Marks brought a thermos full of what smelled like cheap gin and worse memories. Ava Vale wore a charcoal pantsuit, sharp enough to cut. Glass, and announced at the door she'd booked a train home for midnight. Let's keep it crisp, she said. They sat where they had before. Fritz brought no canapes. Wolfe leaned forward. I thank you for returning. I will speak plainly. The room held still. Wallace Reeve did not die in this house. He died shortly after leaving it. But his disappearance was aided, perhaps unintentionally, by at least two people in this room. One of you, Mr. Marks, facilitated his access to the brownstone, likely through a forged maintenance contract. Marks flinched but didn't speak. Wolfe continued. Reeve stored a weapon here. It was removed, under duress or agreement, by Ellen Lang. She did not sell it. She kept it. She feared what it represented, and when she realized others were looking for it, she destroyed it. Ava raised an eyebrow. How do you know? Because someone else tried to recover it. Mr. Fuller. He failed, because it no longer exists. But he hoped I would say so publicly, giving him cover to explain its absence without admitting guilt. Mims looked between them. So what does this have to do with us? Wolfe's tone cooled. You were all involved in a web of silence. Miss Mims, you heard things and reported none of them. Mr. Marks, you facilitated Reeve's entrance. Mrs. Vale, your husband attempted to sell the blade once before. You may not have known at the time, but you do now. Ava's voice was ice. Are you accusing me of conspiracy, Mr. Wolfe? No, Wolfe said. I'm accusing all of you of cowardice. That stunned the room. You feared scandal, loss, shame. So you watched a girl lose her grasp on memory and allowed a mystery to become a wound. No longer. He tapped a finger on his desk. I will be writing a letter to the NYPD, detailing the Reeve connection, the failed investigation, and the recent manipulation of Miss Lang. I will include the confession signed by Mr. Fuller. Marks laughed bitterly. And what's the point? He's dead. The blades gone, there's no body. The point, Wolfe said, is that truth is not measured by its ability to punish, it is measured by its refusal to be buried. No one spoke. The room had the feel of an attic being aired after years of dust. Wolfe nodded once, then turned his chair back toward the orchids. You may go. They left, slower this time. Miss Mimms said nothing as she passed me. Marks gave a quiet, sorry. Archie, like I'd been a casualty of some long war he hadn't won. Ava paused in the front hall. She looked over her shoulder at Wolfe's closed door. He's wrong, you know, she said. How's that? Truth isn't a tonic. It's a scalpel. It cuts clean, but it always leaves a scar. I didn't argue. She left. Later that night, Fritz made veal piccata and opened a bottle of Barbera without being asked. That alone told me the case had wormed its way under his skin, too. Wolfe took his time with dinner. He ate in silence, then retired to the office with his usual beer and a copy of La Revue du Vin de France. I followed with 2 tumblers and a question. What made you change course? I asked. What made you call them back? He didn't look up from the magazine. I was unsatisfied, he said. Too much remained implicit. Silence is a corrosive thing, Archie. It erodes not only memory but meaning. You wanted them to hear it from you. I wanted them to know what they'd allowed to happen, not merely suspect it, know it, even if there's no arrest, no justice. There is always justice, Wolfe said. It simply wears many coats. Today, it wore shame. He sipped his beer. I waited, thinking that might be the end. Then Wolfe added, almost as an afterthought, also, I dislike being used. It took 3 days for the dust to settle, and that's being generous. Wolfe didn't speak of the case again, not directly. Anyway, he didn't need to. For him, the act of naming the thing, dragging it out into the parlor like a threadbare rug, and showing everyone just how many feet had scuffed it, was the point. Once exposed, it lost its power. The rest was just residue, but for the rest of us there were pieces to pick up. Cora Lang called the next afternoon. I took the call. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. I know it wasn't a pleasant job. No, I said, but it was a necessary one. You remember more now? Not everything. Just flashes. The hallway. My mother crying. I still don't know what she did, or why. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, maybe you're not supposed to. Maybe the only thing you needed to recover was the fact that something was hidden. You were right not to let it stay buried. She paused. You think she killed him? No, I said. I think she kept him out. Maybe locked him out of the kitchen. Maybe she stopped him from doing something worse. Maybe she didn't save his life, but she might have saved yours. That landed. She exhaled. You think Wolfe would ever speak to me again? If you bring a good Alsatian Riesling and don't rearrange the kitchen chairs, you might be surprised. She laughed softly. I hung up after promising to keep her. Updated if anything new came up. It wouldn't. Not from us. That evening, Saul dropped off a file. Fuller was gone. Resigned from his contract security firm. Last seen boarding a flight to Sao Paulo under a different name. Diego F. O'Malley, of all things. Wolfe didn't even grunt. Just placed the folder in the bottom drawer and turned the page of his book. Marks sent a postcard. One of those gaudy novelty ones with the Statue of Liberty dressed in drag. It read, to Wolfe with reluctant respect. To Archie with reluctant fondness. I'm going sober. Maybe. I pinned it to the wall next to the radiator. Fritz disapproved. Mimms never called. Ava Vale sent an email. Terse, polite, and legalese-scented. She thanked Wolfe for his uncompromising pursuit of inconvenient truths, which I translated, "As you embarrassed me, but I'm not going to sue." Life resumed. The orchids thrived. Fritz went back to experimenting with duck confit. Wolfe returned to glaring at politics in the Gazette. But there was a small shift I couldn't unsee. He lingered, longer in the kitchen now. Not in the way of a man guarding his turf, but like someone revisiting a place he'd been too proud to examine. One morning, I found him running a finger along the butcher block counter, not inspecting, not fussing, just tracing it. "Something bothering you?" I asked. He didn't look up. Not anymore. He turned and left, so naturally I had to know. Later that week, while Fritz was out restocking Armagnac, I pulled up the old house ledger Wolfe kept in the safe. He hadn't looked at it in years. It was from that odd period, 1994 to 1996, when tenants came and went like summer storms. His notations were brief. Names, payment status, a few personal impressions in shorthand. Reeve's entry was there. W. Reeve, broker, 4B, paid in cash, no complaint. But under Ellen Lang's, there was something I hadn't noticed before, just a single phrase, added in Wolfe's distinct script after she'd moved out. Knew more than she said. Left with less than she brought. It didn't explain the blade, it didn't accuse, but it told me something Wolfe hadn't. He had suspected her from the beginning, but he hadn't pressed it. Either because there was no proof, or because even Wolfe knew when to let something remain unsaid. The following Sunday, Wolfe invited me to dinner. Not unusual, but this time he let me pick the wine. That was unusual. I chose something from northern Italy, mid-tier, modest. He sniffed it, declared it sufficient, and proceeded to drink the entire bottle with his cassoulet. Halfway through the second course, he said, "You handled yourself well. Thank you. You made assumptions, but they were reasonable. You exercised restraint." "Were you worried I wouldn't?" he grunted. "You have on occasion pursued satisfaction over solution." "Well," I said, "I work for a man who rarely offers either." Wolfe lifted his glass. This case was not about proof. It was about presence. Memory is a kind of evidence. I considered that. "You think Fuller will stay gone?" "He will not return to this city. That is sufficient." "What about the blade?" He wiped his mouth. "Destroyed. Long ago. Ellen Lang was cleverer than most. She knew its presence endangered her child. A mother who sees clearly is more dangerous than a man with a weapon." That, I thought, might be the closest Wolfe would ever come to calling someone heroic. By the time Fritz brought out the cheese plate, Wolfe had gone quiet. Not his brooding quiet, his finished with the matter quiet. I poured myself a second glass. "No," I said. "I always thought the kitchen was untouchable, like holy ground." "It was," he said, "until someone bled in it." We sat for a moment in that sentence. Then Wolfe added, "Now it is sacred for a different reason." I nodded. "Forgiveness?" "No. Truth." It lingered here, quietly. So until it was recognized. He reached for the blue cheese, delicate as a jeweler choosing a diamond, and that was the end of it. It's been weeks now, and the brownstone is back to its baseline, orderly, quiet, simmering with subtext. Wolfe reads, Fritz simmers. I answer phones and chase people who lie professionally. Every now and then I think about that recipe card. I still have it, tucked in the bottom drawer of my desk. I don't know if it was Fuller who wrote it, or Cora, or someone else entirely. Maybe it was never meant to lead to a blade. Maybe it was always meant to lead to the truth behind it. Doesn't matter. What matters is that Wolfe won. Not in court. Not on paper. But in the only way that counts. In his world, with clarity, with words. And, of course, with dinner served hot and silence restored. A week after the case closed in our way, not the legal kind, Wolfe dictated a letter. That wasn't unusual. Wolfe writes more letters than some attorneys file motions. They go to editors, judges, vintners, academics, and, on rare and infuriating occasions, to me. But this one was different. He didn't use the typewriter, didn't even ask me to take dictation. He sat down in the office chair with a fountain pen and wrote the whole thing himself. Slowly, carefully, on the good paper, cream-colored, thick, enough to build a dam. I asked once what it was. A statement, he said. Nothing more. The letter was addressed to the Commissioner of Police, with a CC to the Chief Archivist of the Municipal Cold Case Division. I saw the first page before he sealed it. Simple declarative prose, no adornments. He wrote, "This house was once a site of storage for an object of high value and low morality. That object, whether weapon or symbol, was removed before it. Could be misused. One person disappeared, others conspired to forget. I, however, remember." That was it. No names, no dates, no confessions or conclusions. Just Wolfe, adding his weight to a long-forgotten event, declaring it real and, more importantly, known. He sent it with his usual embossed stationery and a delivery receipt. "Won't that draw heat?" I asked. "I invite it," Wolfe said. "Let them come. It will remind them that some things, even unprovable, are worth acknowledging." I let it go. You don't argue with a man who chooses his words like an executioner chooses blades. We got no response, of course we didn't. That was the whole point. The truth is, Wolfe didn't solve a murder this time. There was no corpse, no bullet, no blood trail, just echoes, just the soft scrape of a girl's memory and a weapon that passed through the brownstone like a ghost. But Wolfe clarified something, and for him that's more sacred than solving. Me? I like a good collar. I like knowing someone's going to sit in a cell for a few decades. I like evidence, fingerprints, things you can point at in court. But even I know there are crimes you don't prosecute. They just hang around your shoulders until someone stares them down. And Wolfe stared. I watched it happen. The kitchen went back to normal. Fritz stopped treating the spice drawer like a crime scene. The missing cleaver never turned up, and neither of us asked again. If it had been part of the original mess, the weapon Reeve wanted, or the one he feared, it was gone. We even replaced the cutting board. Fritz insisted on a new one. Walnut, with a branded W burned into the side for good measure. I didn't ask if that was his idea or Wolfe's. Maybe it didn't matter. Sometimes the tools change because the memories demand it. But Wolfe hasn't used it yet. He still prefers. The old board, with its faint scars and history, says it's better for precision. One morning I asked him if he thought Ellen Lang had gotten away with something. "She got away with protecting her child," he said. "That's not a crime. That's biology. You're saying she was justified. I'm saying she made the only choice she could live with, and she lived with it." I nodded. "And Reeve?" Wolfe grunted. "He disappeared. Perhaps he fled. Perhaps he was silenced. I will not declare what I cannot confirm, but I suspect his fate suited his behavior. That was as close as Wolfe ever got to damning a man without due process, which in this case felt right. I got a letter from Cora, handwritten, neat cursive. She said she'd started seeing a therapist, said the memory was coming back in fragments, wallpaper, a dropped glass, the sound of metal hitting tile. She thanked me. She said the brownstone was smaller than she remembered, but somehow heavier. "I think it holds more than people know," she wrote. I didn't show Wolfe the letter, but I left it on his desk. He didn't mention it. The next morning, Fritz made her mother's old recipe, duck à l'orange. No announcement, no conversation. Just the smell filling the kitchen like a memory, and Wolfe ate every bite. Here's the thing they never tell you about truth. It doesn't solve. It settles, like dust, like leaves, like an old debt that no longer needs paying. Wolfe didn't clear anyone's name. He didn't condemn anyone either. He did something stranger. He recognized what had been hidden. A knife, a name, a moment in a kitchen that no longer holds fingerprints, but still holds weight. And once he named it, just named it, it stopped being a secret. That's justice, Wolfe style. No. Drama. No courtroom. Just a man too large for any seat but his own, refusing to let silence win. A week later, a box arrived. No return address. Inside, the old cutting board. The original. I took it out slowly, half expecting a note or a message, carved underneath. But there was nothing. Just wood, familiar weight, a faint discoloration in one corner. I showed Wolfe. He glanced at it once. "Keep it," he said. "It remembers better than most people." So I did. I leaned it against the wall of my office, where it sits now, silent, scarred, and absolutely solid. Some mysteries get solved, some get buried, and some get understood. This one, Wolfe understood it, and he made sure the people involved understood what they'd done, what they'd allowed, and what they'd forgotten. That's not justice in the books, but it's justice in the brownstone, and that's good enough for me.